I'm Dr. Frank Krell, Curator of Entomology at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science and currently grounded at home in Keensburg, Colorado. It is an honor and a pleasure to introduce The Love Bugs to you, a wonderful documentary about a married couple of entomologists, people who study insects, who have amassed an enormous collection of over 1 million specimens over more than half of a century. Lois and Charlie O'Brien are remarkable, not unique, because there are lots of people who still collect insects, but in their efforts to study their group of insects, they have compiled a collection that is truly remarkable, because it is probably currently one of the largest private insect collections in the world. And they have decided in the 80s that they give this collection to a public museum, to the Natural History Museum of Arizona State University in Tempe. These insect collections are a very, are the cornerstone of a lot of research that we do on the species we share the planet with. Without these collections, some research just couldn't happen. You can't just take a photograph and then put it under a scanning electron microscope, because you would see something but not the details of the specimen you want to study. A photograph you also can't turn around and see the underside of the specimen, because you see the underside of the photograph. You also can't extract, say, DNA from a photograph, or stable isotopes, or whatever you want to study, material from that specimen. So the original specimen, collections of original specimens, are extremely important to the world, because, we have, as humans, we have a desire to know what is around us. What species we share the planet with. What do they do to us, without us? Where are they distributed? What do they need? Do we want to keep them? Do we want to preserve them? What are their requirements? And so these questions can only be answered if we have a lot of data. And these data are, mostly found in natural history collections. Allison, Otto and Maria Clinton have done a remarkable job to present this wonderful couple, Lois and Charlie O'Brien, to us, and what they did and what they still do. Lois, now in her end 80s, is still active researching plant hoppers. And Charlie, in his mid-80s, despite Parkinson's disease, is still studying weevils, which is pretty remarkable, because weevils is the largest group of beetles, which in turn is the largest group of insects, which is the largest group of organisms on the earth. There are lots of weevils around. They're all difficult to identify. I know that. I tried identifying weevils. And it's not sort of to my pleasure, but he does it. And weevils are you will see that in the movie. There are fantastic animals, fantastically colored, unreal, and just so many of them. If you like diversity, if you like, the width of morphological variation. If you want to look at things that you never have imagined that this occurs in nature, patterns, colors, then weevils is a group you probably want to look at. I have worked with Allison Otto, one of the directors of that movie, before. We did a couple of small documentaries, one on worms. You wouldn't believe that you can make a pleasant video on worms, but she can. And one on the rainbow scarab, probably the prettiest beetle in the American West. Check out Allison Otto's webpage. You will find these videos there. She is a very talented director and a very, very pleasant person to work with. And here, well, it's really it's so close to my heart to see these husband and wife working together on this collection. My wife is an ecologist, a scientist too. We have collected together, but we got children. That changes a lot. And now, well, she's less engaged in bugs and more engaged in children and homeschooling them and, well, preparing them for life. That is different from having all the time to focus on your studies. But Charles and Lois O'Brien, they have dedicated all their life to that collection. And these collections, well, as important as they are so difficult nowadays to compile because we have changed the planet. In the last 50 years, we have changed the planet dramatically. A lot of habitats are gone. And that's not only true for the tropical rainforest, where in places you can find only oil palm plantations these days, and no longer the wide variety of trees and animals that originally lived there. But also here, if you look in Colorado, as how the Front Range has changed in the last 50 years, how the plains have changed, the prairies. There's hardly any natural piece of prairie left in North America. And if there is a piece of prairie that looks natural, then most of the grasses are invasives from Europe and Asia. We have changed our environment a lot. And, well, in lack of a time machine, we can't go back and collect how it was, collect the specimens, the species that were here before we changed everything. Now even the climate is changing more rapidly than usual. So in lack of a time machine, these collections that were compiled at the time, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, these are the baseline that we need to study what has changed. We can go out and still collect, although there's increasingly red tape everywhere. This is another, well, sort of hindrance of compiling a collection like this, that you need a lot of paperwork these days, and it's not always easy to get. You can't just go out and collect what you want. It's all regulated everywhere. So these old collections are a treasure trove, and if they are not preserved and not given to natural history museums, then, well, we don't have these baseline data available to do the all-important study on the change that is currently happening. These collections have always been, well, what natural history museums were made out of. Our museum here in Denver had 3 founding collections: a butterfly collection, Mason butterfly collection, the Campion Gold collection, and the Edwin Carter mammal and bird collection. These were private collections that founded this museum, built this museum. And almost all the natural history museums are mainly compiled of private collections that were donated to those museums. Museums collect themselves, of course, but we can't do that much. We can't spend several lives to compile a collection like the O'Briens. And then you might say, why do we have to kill all these specimens? I said already that you need specimens to do particular studies. And it is also not too relevant to the populations that we take some specimens out of the population. Most insects end up as bird poop anyway, or on our windshields, or killed by our pesticides, or we have destroyed their habitats already and they are not there anymore in the first place. Scientific collecting has never harmed any population. Commercial collecting can, but scientific collecting of insects reproduce too fast and too plentiful to be harmed by, well, a few collectors going to a place and collecting a few hundred or thousand specimens. A bird can do much more, and they just eat them, right, and poop them out again. So these collections are a treasure trove for the future generations. We will work, well, the museums preserve not only for a couple of 100 years, as Lois assumed. Well, we want to preserve them for eternity. Museums are, well, installed as permanent repository. Natural history museums are a permanent repository of our natural heritage. And we hope that the specimens are there a couple of 1,000 years from now, if we are still there, if there are still science around and scientists studying these things, then we will still have them available in museums. That is our mission. And, well, Arizona State is a wonderful museum. It's a wonderful place, very active. We have researchers coming. Arizona State has even more researchers coming studying these things. These are not collections that collecting dust somewhere in storerooms. These are actively researched, actively used. You've seen that they digitize the collection wonderfully. But these are very, very active parts of ongoing research projects. So they will probably do the best with that collection that can be done. And the legacy of the O'Briens is preserved long after the O'Briens will be gone. Hundreds and hundreds of years after the O'Briens will be gone. And the O'Briens will still live in this collection. And the love bugs will just continue, well, in eternity in Arizona State University. Have fun with that video. It's worth watching. It's wonderful. Thank you very much.